I'm trapped.
What do you mean you're trapped?
I'm trapped and can't clap. You have to clap.
Alrighty. Those will go there for now. Alright. Hello everyone. Welcome once again to Editing the Academy. My name is Darryl.
My name is Laura.
And Laura, before we start, we should have done this last time, and I apologize for this. Congratulations on completing a decade.
Thank you very much. Right back at you.
There we go.
Yay us.
All right.
1970s.
That was all right.
Excellent.
As always, what's the year and what are the movies that we are doing?
Okay, these are the movies that were produced in 1981 and they were up for Best Picture in 1982. We have Atlantic City, On Golden Pond, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Chariots of Fire, and Reds.
Okay. Other notable films this year, and I apologize, there's a lot because it was a really good year for movies. The Postman Always Rings Twice, Absence of Malice, Taps, My Dinner with Andre, One from the Heart, The French Lieutenant's Woman, Clash of the Titans, Mommy Dearest, Das Boot, Stripes, Excalibur, Escape from New York, Mad Max 2, Time Bandits, Heavy Metal, History of the World Part 1, Arthur, Cannonball Run. I've mentioned this with other actors, Burt Reynolds that year in 3 movies.
Okay, Cannonball Run.
Yep.
What were the others?
Sharky's Machine, and one I had not heard of called Paternity.
Oh, I've seen that.
Okay.
Beverly
Is it a comedy?
D'Angelo. Yeah, Beverly D'Angelo. It's pretty good.
All right, where would you like, actually, I'm going to make the executive decision.
All right.
We're starting with Atlantic City.
Okay.
Atlantic City, directed by Louis Malle, from a screenplay by John Guillard. It stars Burt Lancaster, Susan Sarandon in the leading roles. Supporting cast was Kate Reid, Michael Piccoli, Robert Joy, Holly McLaurin, and Al Waxman. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay. It did not win anything. Shocker, I know. I'm going to start with this one if you don't mind.
Fun facts?
Oh, God, yes. Sorry.
That's okay. Fun facts. So interestingly, there is no score in this movie. The only music in the movie is what the characters have in their world. If they turn on the radio, there's music. If they turn off the radio, there is no music.
That is true. Maybe, okay, I'm going to come back to that.
Okay, and Louis Malle, the director, is married to, was married to, he's passed away, Candice Bergen.
Oh!
For years and years.
Oh, okay. That's kind of cool.
All right. You start.
This is an odd movie, and
yes,
I think now that you mention it, it makes it so glaringly obvious that I didn't pick up on it. The lack of a soundtrack, I think, is part of what was unsettling for this movie.
Yes.
My biggest question while I was watching it, and I don't have a lot to say because it essentially boils down to this: what was the point?
Mine was why, but okay, yeah.
Essentially the same question.
Yes.
The characters, they go on some kind of journey, there's some form of a plot, but none of it is interesting, none of it captivated me, I didn't care. Like, why? What was the point of this movie?
Okay, I totally agree with you, there was no massive point. I enjoyed the journey.
Okay.
So I enjoyed the journey because I enjoyed the characters, and I thought it was one of those movies where if it had not been Burt Lancaster and Louis Malle, who is a renowned director, I don't think it would have been an Oscar-nominated one by any stretch. It was a very small film, which we've talked about before, but I enjoyed the characters. They were very unique, which I enjoyed. Like Burt Lancaster and I forget the name of Grace, the old woman downstairs. You don't see that every day.
No, no.
But yet, an old gun moll who came for an Atlantic City pageant. Like, I got who she was, and she was very interesting. And weirdly, almost everyone ended up with a happy ending. I thought it was a very sweet, interesting movie. I had no idea what to expect. I assumed they were all going to be. I looked at it kind of like Dog Day Afternoon. Like, this is not going to end well. They're all going to get gunned down in a blaze of glory. And they all had their little tiny, joyous endings, and I enjoyed that.
They did all come to some sort of satisfactory ending.
Yeah.
I will give you that. The journey of getting there, I did not enjoy because I kept questioning why, what's the point, and I couldn't get out of that the entire movie. I thought it started off pretty good, and I was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting Like the whole fact of when you realize that Susan Sarandon's character, the main character, her husband has been sleeping with the sister,
yes.
and she's pregnant, and they're coming back to her for help. I was like, oh, there's a lot that they're going to play with here, and they didn't.
No, she barely interacted with her sister, and they were also hippies, yet kind of like white powder drug dealers, which is not usually something you see in combination. So I thought that was a little bit odd too. And yeah, that whole part of her life was not really important to the story.
As I was watching it, I kept getting the feeling that this was a draft of the movie, and they just never went back and did another version. I think if they had tightened things up, expanded, given a little bit here, given a little bit there, if they'd written another draft, I think this would have been a far better movie, and I would have enjoyed the journey much more. But again, it just felt like a first draft.
I just thought it was interesting that their dreams were very small, and that's kind of sweet in a way. Like, these were not people who wanted to be gazillionaires or wanted to have all the power of the city.
Correct.
She wanted to be a dealer in a, Monte Carlo casino.
Yep.
He wanted to be thought well of in his world, and he wanted to have a good reputation.
Which apparently he did.
Well, I think he did at the end. I think what I was learning was he pretended to have a great reputation, but he was basically Grace's husband's kind of just sidekick. He had never killed anybody. He had never done those things that you would think would put him in good stead with the mob. I thought he told us he had a better, more interesting past than he actually did.
In retrospect, I think you're probably right. He probably had some sort of minor dealings in Vegas.
Yeah.
Came out here, embellished his reputation, was trying to build a reputation. Okay, I can see that.
Exactly. So they got their very small dreams fulfilled, and I think you were probably looking for the greater why, and I was just like eating popcorn and enjoying it. So that's why we have different experiences, but I think we see the same thing in the movie.
I will give the movie credit for one of the more interesting openings that I've seen in a movie in a very long time, because you open with someone who obviously doesn't know how to cut lemons.
Very true.
Opera.
Yep.
And a pervert.
Exactly. And also, like, why? I was thinking to myself, like, the lemons is it a skin routine? What's that? It's to get the fish off her smell off of her fingers, which she explains halfway through the movie. I was thinking it was a skincare routine of some kind. I'm like, am I missing out on something?
I just couldn't get over the fact that she didn't know how to cut lemons. Like,
she really did
obvious.
not. She'd never cut a lemon. Mm-hmm.
So again, I struggled with this. It seemed like a draft, and I kept asking why, what's the point, and I was not given that answer. That might be me. I will acknowledge that. But I didn't enjoy this at all.
I thought, here's some interesting people living their lives, and I'm going to watch them for 2 hours. And it was fine. It was fine.
Okay, so that one was quickly dispensed. Thank you very much.
There you go.
I have Chariots of Fire next, but I don't care.
Let's go there.
All right.
That works.
Chariots of Fire, directed by Hugh Hudson, written by Colin Wellens, and produced by David Putnam. It's based on the true story of 2 British athletes in the 1924 Olympics, starring Harold, that's the...
Ben Cross, I think.
Yeah, Ben Cross, Ian Charleson, and Nigel Havers, Ian Holm, John Gielgud, Lindsay Anderson, Cheryl Campbell, Alice Krige, Brad Davis, and Dennis Christopher. And then Kenneth Branagh and Stephen Fry make their film debuts in this movie. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenplay, written directly for the screen, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, one for score, costume design, and for screenplay, written directly for the screen. Go with the facts.
Okay, so you did steal 2 of my facts about Stephen Fry and Kenneth Branagh, but I thought you might because they're pretty well known. So my backup fact is, while most of the people in this story were real people, the Lord that was the guy who ran the hurdles, his name and a few character details were changed because the Lord that he was set upon, or that it was based upon, didn't want to be any part of the movie and didn't want his name used. So they changed the name and a few facts so that it was based on.
Was there any information as to why he didn't want it?
No, I couldn't find anything. He just didn't want to be part of it.
That's strange.
So,
usually, like even back in the 80s, people were like, I'm going to be part of the movie.
I would think so. So I have no idea.
Okay. Would you want to start with this one, or would you like me to?
I'd be happy to start with it. So, and I kind of start when I do my notes of what are my overall thoughts. And my overall thoughts were, I sure watched this movie. I ticked that box. So I watched this movie.
Had you seen this before?
I did a very long time ago.
Okay.
And I remember not being terribly impressed with it. And I think that's kind of where I landed here as well. So kind of like overall, like of the two men, I thought the Scottish man, Little's story was much more interesting, much more kind of well-crafted, drawn out. I thought the character was more interesting. The thing that threw me off weirdly is we started with the funeral of Harold's, you know, the Ben Cross character, who his Jewishness was very important to him, and that was an important part of the story. It was a Christian service that was his funeral, and like I never understood that throughout the rest of it. So why did that happen?
I didn't know. I didn't recognize it. It seemed like a normal funeral, and normal funerals are Christian funerals, so I didn't really attribute anything to that. But obviously, yes, it was. And
well, I think for Jewish people, normal funerals are Jewish.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
My point was that because you're correct that so much was made, and he had such pride in being Jewish throughout the entire thing. Why wouldn't they have a Jewish ceremony versus this ceremony? I don't know.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, or odd anyway, and also, except for a few of the very main characters, I had a really hard time telling who was who, especially on the running, you know, the folks that were running. I knew the Lord that did the hurdles, and everybody else was blonde, waspy Brit guy.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It was nice to see Dennis Christopher and Brad Davis, the two Americans, because we had just seen them in Midnight Express and what was the other one? The one about the bicycles. Breaking Away.
Yeah, Breaking Away.
So we had just seen them, but interesting, like 3 or 4 years later, they're now doing very tiny, minor supporting character roles. So I thought that was interesting. I've left you speechless.
No. So I caught on very quickly what the movie was setting up.
Sure.
And I think it did a good job of setting it up, and basically through this story of running have Christianity battling against Judaism and people's perceptions of that. And that was, that wove all the way through.
It was, but again, I was taken out of that at the beginning because if his Judaism was so important to him, then why was his burial Christian? And that just threw me off.
Having that as the theme that they were trying to explore, there were key moments where I thought they kind of missed opportunities. The film, at least initially, did lean very heavily Christian, and he was almost consistently having to defend himself.
Yes.
Everybody was for the Christian guy, everybody really wasn't for the Jew. When he loses for the first time to the Christian guy, great lost opportunity there. He just turns into a whiny little child, as opposed to exploring more this theme that you've set up.
Yeah.
The ending, where everybody wins at least one race and gets their medal and everybody's happy, I thought that was also a missed opportunity, because I think the film wanted to not steer you in one direction or another. I think that's why both men won at the end, but they didn't really handle it all that well. For having weaved this theme all the way through, the end was a perfect opportunity to explore that and give greater importance to it, or make it known that there was no importance to it whatsoever. And it didn't do either, just kind of rode the middle wave.
Yeah, exactly. I did think the one interesting conversation that I thought that they actually did flesh out pretty well was about when the folks at the school were saying you should not be hiring a professional coach to help you. And it reminded me very much of the conversation we're having right now about affirmative action in schools, is that, you know, the schools are saying you can accept the help that we've decided is okay, which is people we can bring into the school and all of the training that we give you, but you cannot have the help you've decided. Like the elite class will decide what is appropriate help and what is not appropriate help. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation.
To me, like, I thought the film was fine. Like, you don't like boxing movies in general. I don't like running movies in general. They're just generally boring to me because I don't care about running. I really don't. So to make a running movie more interesting, you have to have something to latch my attention onto, which this did in this battle between Christianity and Judaism all the way through. But it was so mishandled, and it didn't try, I don't know, it lacked for tackling this great subject matter,
Yes.
it lacked.
It was very surface level.
Yes.
Very surface level. Like, okay, he is experiencing prejudice in school. We can absolutely see that. And this gentleman is struggling with his Christianity and where are the gifts that God gave me versus the rules he has set behind, which first of all I thought was the more interesting story.
Yeah.
Had they given us more in the prejudice, Harold's story, I would have really been interested, but I wasn't.
Like, to me, the film didn't make up its mind what it wanted to do. Introducing these two themes, you have to make a choice. Ultimately, at the end, are you going to say that it doesn't matter, we should all get along? Or are you trying to make some sort of point about religion? Is Christianity better? Is Judaism better? Or are you just trying to show the plight of the the Jews and the negativity that they encounter merely by existing? Like, it didn't do any of that. And I thought it was a massive missed opportunity, because if you're going to introduce something that heavy, you have to handle it well. And they did not.
I agree completely. So here's going to be some really mean statement, which is, did they run funny? Did they they did not look like runners. They didn't. They kind of look a little out there.
Well, you also have to understand that this was back technically the 1920s.
Yes.
And running has significantly evolved.
Yeah, the training scenes I knew were very 1920s, but literally the running, their arms were flailing about. It just seemed odd.
And if you notice what they run in, it's basically like shoes.
Oh yeah, like golf shoes almost with the spikes.
They're almost dress shoes. They're like their third pair of best dress shoes that they.
And they had to dig up their own mounds to put their feet against, which was kind of odd and funny. So yeah, but yeah, so I watched that.
Yeah,
sure did.
I don't know about you. I mean, you get to the song real quick.
Oh yeah.
Growing up,
it's beautiful. It really is.
Could not ignore that song.
Yeah.
And I've always disliked that song.
Oh really?
Yeah,
See, I like it. I think it's beautiful
I'll tell you a story
and overused.
I'll tell you a story offline of why.
I look forward to that.
But so with that, because it's essentially an electronic theme.
Yeah.
That's the main theme. And so throughout, the score is electronic, and it seemed more like it should have been in an 80s horror movie than in this dramatic piece. Like, the electronic aspect of it took me out of the movie every time there was some sort of it just took me out.
I thought that it was just poorly matched with a period piece. It was very 1982 or 1981, but it just was poorly matched with a period piece. But I think it's a pretty song.
Yeah, that's all. I think it was a completely missed opportunity. This film could have been so much better had they decided on something, and they didn't.
Yeah.
They just played it safe throughout the entire movie.
I wanted to like Harold, and like you said, whenever he was hit with adversity, he either got defensive or bratty. Didn't care for that. Okay.
All right, moving on.
Yes.
Okay.
On Golden Pond.
Okay, on Golden Pond, directed by Mark Rydell from a screenplay by Ernest Thompson, adapted from a 1979 play of the same name, stars Katharine Hepburn, Henry Fonda in his final theatrical film, Jane Fonda, Doug McKeon, Dabney Coleman, and William Lantrow. Sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your name, I apologize. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Best Screenplay based on material from something else, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Sound. It won for Actor and Actress and Best Screenplay. Okay.
Fun facts. I've got two. The first one I didn't believe, but I saw it in multiple sources that not only had Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn never worked together, they'd never met before this movie.
Really?
Which I really find hard to believe, but I heard it on multiple sources. And then the second fun fact is that his fishing hat is actually Spencer Tracy's fishing hat that Katharine Hepburn gifted to him before the start of the movie.
Aww.
Which I loved, yes.
That's very sweet.
It's very sweet.
Much like the movie.
Very sweet.
All right, I'll start with this one. This is a very sweet movie. This is, I think, the second, maybe third time that I've seen it. It's a wonderful depiction of a couple who have been together for a very long time, what it is like to have that relationship continue, and the patterns, I guess I'll say, that you get into when you're older. He's cantankerous. She's primarily just accepting, but still full of life. The two of them were amazing throughout this entire thing. They also seemed very relaxed in their characters. Like, they weren't acting. They obviously were acting, but it didn't feel like they were acting. It just felt like they just kind of relaxed into their characters and just delivered lines however they felt they needed to. I'm going to start off with a question for you.
Okay.
So, do you think that in her life she is just accepting of the things around her, the way people act? She says certain things, she does certain things that make me kind of go back and forth throughout.
Katharine Hepburn's character?
Correct.
I think so. I think she has to be. I think she has two very stubborn, cantankerous people in her life, and she has to be the neutral party. So I think that she just lets them do their thing and reels them in when she needs to.
Yeah.
But I also, to say something earlier, comment on something earlier you said, they were a perfect old married couple. They
Absolutely.
seemed, that's why I find it hard to believe they'd never even met, because they seem to fit together so extraordinarily well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But why do you ask the question? Do you not think that, where do you land?
I think she is very accepting, and I think you're right, she reels them in every once in a while, but for the most part, she's just such a warm, happy, embracing person that her genuine personality seems at times to be at odds with her relationship with her daughter and her husband. Those two things don't sit all the time, and that's why I kept questioning throughout, does she just accept and move on? Because she seems like she's such a warm, happy person. And I can't imagine, without being an accepting person, that you could still be warm and happy after living with him for 50 years.
I did have that he was a little too cranky to be sympathetic at times. Like a couple of times, he's just a little too cranky.
Yeah.
But I think that was the character, and that's how he played him. And I think that's what she's been dealing with for probably about 40 or more years. So yeah, I think that she is just, you go off and do your thing. And there were moments where you could see his absolute love and adoration for her, and that probably fueled what she needed to keep going through those rough times.
Yeah, it was apparent that the two of them did deeply love each other, even for all of their faults and things that they may not like about the other person. Although it's really hard to find anything to not like about her.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah, she was wonderful. She also did all of her own stunts. She scrambled in and out of the boat. She's the one. She leapt into the lake. She was a very athletic woman until she died. She would go swimming in the ocean every day.
Nice.
Into her 80s. So yeah.
Good for her.
So cool. Very cool lady.
Everybody in this movie has issues, except for Mom, although a case could be made that she had her own issues, but mostly...
She slapped her kid. That's a pretty, that's pretty bold.
Yeah, well, her kid was also not being very nice at the time.
I totally agree, but what I'm saying is she does not let them get beyond a certain point.
For me, in this movie, this is one of my criticisms of it, is that the father-daughter dynamic is a little heavy-handed for me. They're not being able to get along until the very, very end when she finally does her backflip. If that's what it takes, okay, great.
That's all she needed.
But it was very heavy-handed. I thought they could have pulled some of that back a little bit, and it still would have been as interesting and enjoyable and entertaining without going so heavy into it.
Yeah. My criticism is similar to that in that I could not get out of Jane and Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
And you know that they had a lot of difficulties, and her stance on the war, and he was a very conservative person, very, very pro-Vietnam War. Obviously, we know her stance, and they had a lot of public and private battles. And so I just kept seeing the Fondas. That was my biggest problem with it, is it reminded me a lot of Ordinary People that we watched for the last, slate of movies. But because those were different people, different characters, you melded into their character. I could not get past Henry and Jane working out their issues.
And if I remember correctly, at the time, it was like very big news that the two of them were in this movie together.
It was huge.
Because of their animosity that they had publicly.
Yes, very much so.
Overall, the movie felt more like a 1950s, 1960s kind of play than an actual movie. Right. Even though obviously it was a movie, it was filmed, there were locations and things like that.
But it was a play. I mean, it started as a play.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. It wasn't big.
No, and they were able to keep that kind of intimate feeling that a play has and put it on the screen, which a lot of times is very difficult to do when you adapt a play. They make choices, either we're going to go big with this film, or we're going to try to keep it as intimate like the play was, and a lot of times that part fails because it's hard to translate that intimacy onto film. consistently. So I thought that was well done, that they were able to keep those moments and still have it feel like it was a play while making it a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
More motion, more action, obviously more sets, more scenery.
And it was beautiful. It was Swan Lake, New Hampshire, I think is where they filmed it, and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
So, one of the, I want to talk about the husband's son, or Doug McKeon, the kid, because it's one of the pieces I enjoyed the most, and one of the things that bothered me the most.
Okay.
So I have an issue with plot devices that are so clearly contrived. So you've got a daughter who is a little bit estranged from her parents, and she's like, hey, can I have you take care of this kid you don't know for a month? That is a hugely contrived plot point that I could not get past, and it bothered me.
Yeah.
That said, I really enjoyed the kid and his role in it, and how he related to, especially to Henry Fonda's part. So I enjoyed his role. I enjoyed what they did. I loved the, going after Walter, and that was very fun and sweet. But the fact that he was there was too contrived for me.
Yeah, they should have come up with some sort of other rationale for it.
Yeah, rush the husband to the hospital, and you got to take care of him, or something.
Yeah.
It just seemed weird.
I agree, and he does serve a very important purpose, because I think without the kid being there, Henry doesn't soften. And if Henry doesn't soften, then the two of them don't reconcile at the end.
Yes.
So his being there
is a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely, and that purpose was conducted, written, and portrayed very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that the setup to get him there was a little. They could have done much better. But that aspect of it, I thought, worked brilliantly to get you to the end and have that be believable. Because the first time you see Henry, for the first 10, 15 minutes, he's just a bastard.
He's a bit of a pill.
Yeah. And so you need something to be able to soften him, to have that be the ending. And the kid obviously did that. And I thought that was handled very, very well.
The first time you saw this movie, if you can remember back, did you think he was going to die at the end when he had that episode?
I don't remember. I was born in 71, this came out in 80, so I was like 9.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I probably saw it on HBO at the time.
Same here, I think, probably. Yeah, I can't remember either, but I liked the way it ended. Yeah. It's too bad to have that sweet a movie and have a sad ending.
I remember being very jarred when the kid revs it, rather than go backward, revs it, and then you see the two of them go flying and the boat sinking. I remember that being a very kind of traumatic moment for such a still kind of movie, or quiet, small movie. That was a big moment for something to happen. And of course, Mom comes to the rescue in her little outboat. I was like, good for you, Mom.
Mom wins. She is there for everything, yes. And just the loons too, that, at the beginning she hears the loons and she thinks they're speaking to him, and finally at the end Henry's like, oh, they're saying goodbye. And so again, that sweetness and softness has come over him over the summer.
Yep. So yeah, I thought everything about this, they accomplished everything they set out to do. They did it very well, highly above average, not perfect, not excellent, but well above average, I think, for this kind of film. They kept those small moments, they kept the quiet moments. It went big when it had to. You had the emotional impact where it was necessary. Again, the only thing that I really have a problem with is just the heavy-handedness of the father-daughter relationship. They could have pulled that back a little, and I think it would have benefited the film.
Yeah, and I think people were there to see Henry and Jane Fonda, so they wanted to see that. Before we finish talking about the movie though, can I put in a plug to watch something else?
Sure.
After you've watched this goes for everyone, go out on YouTube and watch Jane Fonda, because he died shortly after the making of the movie. He won Best Actor, and Jane Fonda accepted it for him because he was dying, but was still with us. And her acceptance speech, I think, is the most beautiful, poignant, heartfelt, but not soppy acceptance speech I've ever seen.
Okay.
So go, and when you go see it, you have to know that I don't think she got along with her stepmother Shirley, who was very important to him, and she said such kind things about her. So go watch it. It's 2 minutes of your life, and it's lovely.
Let's save Raiders for last and blast through Reds, if you don't mind.
Alrighty, go for it.
Okay, Reds. Co-written, produced, and directed by Warren Beatty, about the life and career of John Reed, an actual person, the journalist and writer who chronicled the October Revolution in Russia in his 1919 book, 10 Days That Shook the World. Beatty is the lead role, along with Diane Keaton, Louise Bryant, Jack Nicholson as Eugene O'Neill. Supporting cast: Edward Herrmann, Jerry Kosinski, Paul Sorvino, Maureen Stapleton, Gene Hackman, Raymond Bierry, Nicholas Coster, and M. Emmett Walsh. It was nominated for pretty much everything: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Screenplay, written directly for the screen, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. It won for Cinematography and Supporting Actress for Maureen Stapleton. And Best Director as well.
All right, and my fun fact is that Maureen Stapleton was afraid of flying.
Oh.
So they had to ship her over to Finland where they were filming some of the scenes on a boat, and there was a delay in shooting because the boat got stuck and it had to be towed somewhere. So, and also what was intended to be a 4 to 5 month shooting schedule took almost a year.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me.
Not surprising, exactly. Filmed in 5 countries.
Yep. This was an interesting opening to me. I think it was effective. The first-hand accounts of the people, I'm assuming they were real people,
They were
real stories of Jack Reed and her. That was effective to me because just when you kind of they either set up what was going to happen next or were commentating on what had just happened, so it gave some sort of context to what you saw.
Yeah.
Because this is a confusing movie.
Okay, because I put down in my overall, this movie made me feel stupid. So I feel good about this being confusing, yeah.
This is the kind of movie that would benefit if you really did understand and know the history.
100%.
They did not spoon feed you the history, and I think that they probably should have done that a little bit more to downplay it and give you the information that was necessary to be able to help move that along.
Agreed.
Because essentially, it's a political movie with a love story kind of in the middle.
I had said that it's 2 different types of movies, a romance and a political story, and 2 genres of a documentary and an actual fictional story, movie.
Yeah, so it tackled a lot, and it, I think, got muddled in all of the things that it was trying to tackle. I think, and forgive me, and you can criticize me if you want to, I don't care, dumbing this one down would have made it a better movie. Just giving the information necessary to understand what was happening. Like, they spend so long on the factions in America trying to figure out what they wanted to be and what they were going to be and battling each other. And you didn't really understand why. There's a whole rationale of how important that was.
Yes.
But they don't mention it. They just, this is what's happening, what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think overall, if they had given just a couple things here and there to give you why we're showing this, why this is important, would have made the movie more palatable, I think. I'm choosing my words very carefully.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, part of it is me as the watcher. I did not know a lot of the history of this. I know the general overlay of kind of what was happening, but I could not track. Okay, so they talk about you can't get to Russia and then suddenly he's in Russia, and he can't get out of jail, but then he's out of jail. And then, they're working with these folks and then they can't work with those folks. And so a little bit more information would have been very helpful. I much more enjoyed the interpersonal, kind of the romance, but it was really more interpersonal relationship between her and Jack and Eugene O'Neill. I thought that was all very interesting and well played, much more so than the political stuff was there, but I think you're right. I think spoon-feeding it just a little bit more would have been helpful. And I loved the witness pieces. I thought that was very interesting, and I actually did a little math for this one, which was, so to them, the events of the book were about 30 years prior.
Okay.
So I think that is 1961 for you and me.
Okay.
So if there were people here talking about 1961, which is terrifyingly close, right? That just doesn't seem right. I gotta check my math.
No,
but I think that's about right.
Your math is accurate.
Yeah.
But the 1960s were not just like a decade or 2 ago.
Exactly, I know, which is terrifying. But also, because I was trying to figure out how old were these folks and and that kind of stuff. But I thought it was really interesting, and I did go back and look at some of the people that they did interview and saw what their roles were. It was like the guy who started the ACLU. Was one of them. So I thought that was interesting. I would love to talk about Jack Reed's entitlement, and I thought it was fascinating that he never really acknowledged how entitled he was, except for in a couple of places it came up like socialism and communism are all good until you're in Finland and want to go home, and you can't because for the greater good you have to stay there.
Right.
And then shows him also to be a little bit xenophobic around the foreigners who speak another language should not be speaking for us. It's like, all Americans, dude, so back yourself up a little bit. So I thought it showing his entitlement was very interesting. Or you know, things aren't going well here. Okay, I'll just pick up and go to Provincetown and start a theater troupe.
Yeah, you're right. Entitlement is the correct word because he's not aware of any of this at all.
No. Do you think Warren Beatty was aware of it? That's what I'm not sure about. Did he put it in there for us to see, or was he even aware of it?
I did have notes on the way they portrayed the characters.
Okay.
And I thought, personally, knowing a little bit, not a heck of a lot at all, but a little bit about Reed as an actual person, that Beatty could have played him more confidently arrogant, but he did. He played him almost literal. Like, he's genuinely surprised in the beginning when people are mad at him, and she's mad at him, and he's taking everything very literal, and when he has conversations with people, he answers the direct question that was asked, which is not the question they intend, but he answers the question they asked. So he's very literal in his presentation of how it was done.
Great point,
And so I thought that was an interesting choice. I thought it worked well for the movie because you can sympathize with him. He's almost comical at points, so you can attach yourself to him a little bit quicker than if he'd just been an arrogant, I know everything about everything kind of person. So I like that as a choice. Keaton plays Louise heartfelt and with a massive chip on her shoulder. And it was interesting how they dealt with that chip. She wants very much to be recognized for her own work. Reed rightly points out in the beginning, well, you're not doing any work.
Exactly.
So nobody's going to recognize anything unless you actually do the work. And then she starts to, and then she has conflict because she's only allowed to be doing this because of the freedom that she has by being in a relationship with him.
Exactly.
But she doesn't want to be in the relationship with him because she's in his shadow. And I thought she portrayed those conflicting things good, borderline great, but not amazing.
I would say this is my favorite Diane Keaton role so far. So this is I think I've seen parts of Reds before. I've never seen it all the way through.
Either way.
This is the first time I saw it all the way through. And one of my complaints of her, which we talked about in Annie Hall, is she plays this kind of like neurotic, ditzy, romantic comedy star, or she's very wooden in The Godfather. And to me, like, she was very fully formed. And you see a lot of positive and negative emotions all across her face. So she was very complicated, and I liked that. She didn't have to be, she was very gray. She didn't have to be positive or negative. But yeah, I liked her, and I would say she did a great job.
I think this is the role where she shows the most range that I've ever seen her in anything. I was questioning sometimes. I understand the role that the character was placed in and the things that were often at odds. I just wondered sometimes if she was able to completely show how she was feeling, the character was feeling about those conflicts. Because every time the conflict came up, she just got angry. And that was her go-to. And I would have liked to have seen something different at different aspects. Anytime there was that conflict, she acknowledges the conflict. She just yells. And
well, I think that yelling was her go-to, but like when she found out, when Jack said, "Oh, okay, it's fine, you're sleeping with Jean because I'm sleeping with all these other women too," and that was news to her.
Sure.
And she wasn't sleeping with Jean anymore. She stopped when they got married. And so, first of all, I saw her be hurt, surprised, and then it all came at him with a wall of anger. But you did see a little bit of that in the background.
Agreed.
But yeah, I was sad. There were so many great supporting characters or great supporting actors, and you name them: Edward Herrmann and Gene Hackman, Nicholas Coster, who didn't do very much.
No.
Other than Jack Nicholson and Maureen Stapleton.
The whole story, the whole movie is those two in orbit, and people just kind of circle in and then circle out.
Yes, exactly. And Paul Sorvino, very, very minor role, but great.
Yep.
So I agree.
The politics of this did, I think, detract from the movie because they spent so much time on them. And I know we talked about this a little bit earlier in this conversation, but pulling some of that back, giving it a little bit more, I think would have actually enhanced the overall story and it could have brought out aspects of the love that the two of them genuinely did have for each other. It could have highlighted like some really nice tender moments there by bringing and explaining more of the overarching thing. This was a grand epic movie. They, like you said, they filmed in 5 different countries. They went to a lot of different places. It took a long period of time for the movie. They were demonstrating over years and years and years. It was too much that it was hard to get through, and the movie was so dense that I think it detracted often because it was so politically dense. Yeah. This is not a movie for everybody. It's a great movie if you know the history.
Well, yeah, so I had like too long, too much, too indulgent as kind of my overall key things. But I do wonder, going back to in 1981, we're in the midst of the Cold War.
Yep.
Warren Beatty, obviously a very, very liberal, very progressive, politically. Let's think about that. Is his assumption everyone knows this story? Everyone knows about the socialist government or socialist party. Everyone knows about the Communist Party. And in 1981, maybe everybody did know this, or at least the people he was aiming the movie to. Maybe he just assumed that we were all along for the ride because he knew it so well.
See, I take it the opposite.
Okay.
I don't think that he thought everybody knew. I thought he was trying to educate.
Okay.
Because all we heard was
throw him a bone.
all we heard was what the government was saying, that communism is bad, Russia is bad. That was it. They're gonna we're all gonna die with nuclear holocaust.
Yeah.
So, and I think by having so much of the political background and the nuances and getting bogged down in those discussions, I think Beatty was trying to educate the people like, hey, look, I get if you don't like communism, but here's what the intent was of these various movements that happened in our country and around the world. Know the history of it before you say just blanketed communism is bad.
Nope, that's a great point.
So I think that was what he was trying to do, and it's a lot of times with when you try to educate somebody, your eyes can just start to gloss over because it becomes too much too fast. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what this movie did, is it was too much too fast.
And he may have thought people were at a level that they were not, or that they needed a level lower to get. I certainly did.
It was a critical success, it was a financial success, so good on him. It did incredibly well, so his mission was accomplished to have a lot of people see it, so good there. In retrospect, years later, it's just so incredibly dense.
It's a lot, yeah.
Okay. All we have left is
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. Where's my Raiders information? Oh, there it is. I'm unorganized. All right, Raiders of the Lost Ark, directed by Steven Spielberg, from a screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan. Based on a story about George Lucas and Philip Kaufman, set in 1936. It stars Harrison Ford, John Rhys Davies, Marion Ravenwood, Karen Allen, and Paul Freeman. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, won for art direction, editing, sound editing, visual effects. And of course, as always in these, we're not saying which one won until the end for Best Picture. Go with the facts.
All right, so first of all, I haven't been saying the AFI because none of these movies, except for Raiders of the Lost Ark, have been on the AFI
where
list. It started at number 60, it's down to number 66 now.
Okay.
So the fun facts are, it's the first movie that Alfred Molina was ever in. He played the henchman at the beginning.
Yep.
And also, not only did this make a lot of money, it blew out every other movie that year. So it made $212 million at the box office. Number 2 that year was On Golden Pond at $119 million.
Wow.
So it made almost $100 million more than the next movie.
Okay, I want to give a quick little fact because I encourage you to check this out. I actually did. I watched only like half an hour of it, but Steven Soderbergh did an edit of this movie where it's all in black and white and there's no sound. And the reason he did that was to show how well crafted each of the shots and cinematography of this movie actually are, because he felt that people were not giving this movie its cinematic due. Because of the big epic hero story, they weren't paying attention to the craft of this movie. So he released that and be like, if you really want to see how to tell a story where you don't need any sound at all, here it is. So
okay, and I love Steven Soderbergh, so I'll go check that out.
Yeah, it's online. You can see it very easily.
All right.
Would you like to start, or would you like me to start?
I will start with this was a very difficult movie to watch with the 1981 lens, I will say.
Sure.
Because first of all, just, I saw it when it came out, I've seen it many times since, I've seen all of the sequels, including the last one. So I have loved this movie. I didn't love it as much on this watch.
A little overkill at this point?
A little overkill. And I don't know if it was the overkill, but I think part of it was I was looking at it as 2024, and I tried very hard not to.
Sure.
In going back into 1981, the special effects are amazing. The action scenes are amazing. I think that there's a lot of really good parts to it, and then there's a little bit of boring stuff in between, and I had forgotten those parts. This is a movie that I think I fast forward through in my brain. So I was a little bit more disappointed this time around. There's a ton of great things to talk about, which we will. There's a couple of things that were a little disappointing. So I'd love to see what was your experience watching it this time.
Before I tell you mine, do you think that because of 4 and 5, which did a little damage to the franchise, do you think that might be having some sort of impact on going back to the originals, like the bad feeling of 4 and 5 in the back of your head?
I don't think so, because actually the thing I took away from 4 and 5, which I enjoyed, was Karen Allen coming back.
Yeah.
So I liked that they kind of brought that relationship back, and so that's the part I'm remembering, and I'm choosing to forget the things I didn't like from 4 and 5. So I think I did some very good brainwashing on myself.
So this one for me is very easily a background movie. If we were back in like the late 80s, early 90s, sitting on the couch on a Sunday and you were scrolling through channels and this was on, you just leave it there and just let it play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times I've seen it, easily double digits, probably low double digits. It's kind of a comfort, and you're right, when you watch a movie enough, you know when your favorite parts are, and you know the parts that are lagging, so you can go make a sandwich or whatever. Like you don't have to be there for this part of it. So it was the same experience that I've had for a long time. I will say, I did like the opening. You know how much I love a good opening.
Yeah.
The opening sets the tone for what you're about to go on, that this is a voyage and a journey, and you're probably not familiar with, because you've got the mountains, big open landscape, and then you see Indy walk in with his fedora and the cap, and it's all back to...
You don't see him for a while.
Correct. Like, it's a good 4 or 5 minutes before you actually see his face when he steps into the light. Just that establishment of, we're telling a fantastical story, set up immediately, and you can buy into that ride very quickly, which, again, a good opening should be able to do for you. What else? Oh, so this is one thing that I did discover. So we've been talking in the 70s about the rise of the auteur filmmaker, that the director is actually the author of the film, not the screenwriter. The whole new Hollywood movement with the big 5 that came out during the 70s.
Yeah.
So, and doing a little bit of research, I should have known it made so much sense. Out of those 5, there were 2 who were kind of going against their counterparts' trend, because their counterparts were doing a lot of anti-heroes. You think like Raging Bull, Taxi Driver. They were doing a lot of anti-heroes. We saw the rise of the anti-hero in the 70s. Both Lucas and Spielberg were doing straight up heroes.
Oh yeah, superheroes.
And so this was a conscious kind of reaction to those films from before of, we're telling a hero story. You know this story, you know the hero's journey, we're just going to make it fun and exciting and the best hero story we possibly can. And this film absolutely succeeds in that.
And I know also that they were trying to do the throwback to the 30s and 40s serials,
Correct.
And they absolutely did that as well, which was, I think, that pattern of there's stuff going on and then there's this action sequence, and it might have ended on a cliffhanger that you have to come back to. And so, obviously theirs just continued into the next part of the story, but it was built on that same kind of pattern. Yeah,
and knowing that, watching it this time, I was I had that in the forefront of my head as I was watching it, and the first half hour of that definitely has that feel, and then it settles right into just a normal story with your typical ups and downs. The serialization aspect kind of took a back seat after that, after basically the opening scene.
The boulder, yeah, I agree.
There, as with every good kind of well-crafted popcorn movie, there are inconsistencies in this movie. My 2 favorites are They both happen in the same scene when he goes to get the medallion from her in her bar, and she's in a drinking contest, and she's very, very drunk, and so she wins the contest. The other guy passes out, and she's very drunk, and then 2 minutes later, she's completely stone cold
Totally
sober.
fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no.
That doesn't work that way?
No. And then he has a 6-shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But he fires like 25 shots.
So I actually watched it with some of my family this weekend, and we were all like, okay, he's on 27 at this point, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but those are things that you absolutely forgive because they're necessary to help move the action along, and you're just like, okay, that's fun, it's not a big deal. I did like that the main character in this one has a very obvious weakness. Because he, in everything else, he is so amazingly confident. He accomplishes all of these things. I mean, he gets the idol stolen from him and things, but he is a very accomplished, competent guy with a very big weakness.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I like that weakness was hinted at and then fully explored later on.
He is also a terrible boyfriend.
Yeah.
He is a terrible boyfriend, and she needs to run far and run fast, as do all women away from him.
The last thing that I will say, the thing that I do really enjoy, and I did do this before I found the Soderbergh thing, is the framing of these shots is just so immaculate and completely planned. Like, you know exactly what you're getting in a scene. And it's Steven Spielberg, so there's a lot of things happening. It's not just usually one static thing. There's a lot that's happening in these scenes, and they are perfectly framed. You get exactly what you're supposed to see, exactly what he wants you to see, and it totally works.
Yep, I completely agree. And also, there's so much that came out of this. Like, again, the boulder scene,
Yeah.
the maps with the arrows leading to where they're going as shorthand to where they are, shorthand to where they're going. There's just so much that came out of this movie that you see today, even, and people are copying today.
Yep.
But like I said, there was just a little inconsistency in the pacing, which I forget because I enjoyed it so much, and it is a perfect popcorn movie.
The thing that I'm coming to realize is obviously there are very different kinds of directors. Different directors tell stories in different ways. But one of the things that we've seen with Spielberg over and over and over again up until this point, and we'll get to it even the next one that we do, the man knows how to tell a story very well through a visual medium. He knows when to push things up, he knows when to pull things back. He knows how to tell a story. Other people they'll show you things, they'll hope you understand the plot and get the point they're trying to make, but it's not always a story. We've seen a lot of those films in the 70s. They weren't really a story, they were just like, here's a thing.
Yeah.
This man knows how to tell a story.
Were you surprised it was nominated for Best Picture?
I
was too, just because that it was recognized in its moment.
Yeah.
That I'm not surprised it's recognized now, that of the 5, it's on the AFI list. I'm not surprised by any of those factors, but that it was recognized in the moment, especially with such more serious or kind of the Oscar-worthy, what we are used to be expecting from it.
Oscar bait.
Yeah, Oscar bait, perfect.
I was, and I have been surprised by a couple of the movies that have been nominated, and I'm sure I will continue to be throughout. But
I'm sure.
Yeah, we've watched enough movies and seen enough of the Academy Awards that we're always expecting each of them just to be Oscar bait. You have to have some sort of handicap that you're overcoming, otherwise what's the point?
Exactly, you have to either gain or lose 30 to 50 pounds in order to be nominated, yeah.
I love this movie. I will definitely watch it again. In fact, after watching this, I did watch the trilogy.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I couldn't stop. I had to. So.
Yeah. Also, having Sean Connery as his father is so
perfect choice. Perfect choice.
Yep, stand by it.
Okay, I'll do a quick drum roll, and then you can announce the winner.
The winner was Chariots of Fire.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that you did not think that movie should have won.
So I'm going to tell you a fact, which you can, may or may not be related to this conversation. Did you know that sometimes the Nobel Prize winners do not give out awards in particular years because they find none of the movies worthy, or none of the books worthy for the Nobel Prize of Literature?
I did not.
Some years they just don't give out an award. So I'm just telling you that for a completely unrelated fact to our conversation. That said, go ahead. What do you? Or you're gonna guess?
Yeah.
I do have a backup.
Okay. I think that you think. I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna say I think Raiders should have won.
No.
No. Okay.
I do not think Chariots should have won. Do you want me to guess you, or do you want me to tell mine?
Go ahead.
I don't think Raiders should have won. I did not love any of the slate for Best Picture. if I was pushed, I would say probably Reds because of its performances, its scope, and the story they told was, you know, like two really interesting stories. I just needed more. So that's my 2 cents. Okay. I'm gonna say you also did not choose Chariots of Fire.
I did not.
And you went with Raiders.
I did, and only because I'm with you that I don't think of the other movies that I listed off. I think there were ones in there that probably should have been in this particular category.
I agree.
And I was surprised that they weren't. I think Raiders is an amazing film. It stood the test of time for sure. And I'm only going with that because it was the most enjoyable out of all of them. And also, it's the most enjoyable and also the most well executed. Like, a lot of these films were well executed. Uncle de Pomp was beautifully executed.
For what it was.
Yep. But Raiders is just a better story to me.
And I don't disagree with that. For me, Reds just kind of like ticked more of the boxes as far as kind of all of the different pieces
this
that
is
you're
a coin
up for.
flip
It absolutely is. I wouldn't be upset if Raiders would have won.
All right, well there you go. 1981 in the bag. Do the liking and subscribing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.